In a previous episode, we looked at the life of Han van Meegeren, whose art forgeries amassed him a great fortune, and whose arrest for treason, on the grounds that he sold a national treasure to the Nazis, was an event of utmost embarrassment for the art experts, who had, up until that point, declared his works original Vermeers. Revenge is a dish best served cold, and that's exactly how he would serve it. And if he made an immense fortune in the process, why not? They would pay in more ways than one. Successful forgers are remembered as great conmen, not artists. This is strange, considering their forgeries fooled even the most seasoned critics. Why are we always captivated by the lives of con artists? Their lives attract our attention and, more often than not, their abilities and guile secretly amaze us. Such is the case with Elmire de Hory, one of the most prolific art forgers of modern times, who, during the 1950s and 60s, faked more than 1,000 artworks, some of which still hang on museum walls around the world.
Someone has won with Charmaine. It's rendezvous time.
I know one thing. I never offered a painting or a drawing to a museum who didn't buy it. That never refused one. Never.
Ibiza has been called home by many colourful characters, but in the 1960s, no other island resident inspired as much intrigue as Elmire de Hory. He could be recognized by his customary golden monocle, patterned cravats, and exotic East European accent. Just like Gatsby, he threw lavish parties in an enchanting old-world villa overlooking the sea. Among the guests were celebrities Marlene Dietrich and Ursula Andress, who, marvelling at de Hory's collections of priceless Parisian paintings, suspected their host was of royal blood.
Voilà, Brigitte la Victoire. Bonsoir, bonsoir, bonsoir. Entrez. Bonjour, cher ami. Entrez, prenez des drinks. Vous êtes très belle. Voyez juste ce soir.
Just as Gatsby confided in Nick Carraway, so too did de Hory eventually open up to his own neighbour, a journalist named Clifford Irving. He was not of royal blood, and the paintings displayed in his villa were neither priceless nor Parisian. They were fakes. Fakes he had forged himself and sold to galleries and oil tycoons using numerous fake identities. If legend is correct, the best works by Elmire de Hory are still to be found in the world's major art collections and museums, masquerading as genuine works by the likes of Picasso, Matisse, Monet, Degas, Van Dongen and Modigliani.
All the world loves to see the experts and the establishment made a fool of. And everyone likes to feel that those who set themselves up as experts are really just as gullible as anybody else. And so Elmire, as the great faker of the 20th century, becomes a modern folk hero for the rest of us.
Elmire de Hory changed his name and constructed many identities, which contributed to his allure and granted him access to the art world elite. He wore a monocle hanging from a gold chain. His sweaters were always cashmere. On his wrist, a Cartier wristwatch, and he sat behind the wheel of a red Corvette Stingray convertible. Only until recently have we become aware of the facts surrounding his life. With research and testimonies, today it is known that Elmire was born in 1906 as Elmire Hoffmann in Budapest, Hungary. He began his formal art training at the Nagabanya Artists Colony at the age of 16 and continued at the Akademie Heinemann Art School in Munich. In 1926 he moved to Paris and enrolled at the Académie Le Grand Chaumière, where he studied with Fernand Léger. As for his family, Elmire always said that his father was a Catholic and a diplomat, belonging to the aristocracy, but the Budapest registry lists him as a Jewish handicraft merchant. He discovered his artistic talents at an early age and cultivated them at a number of institutions, but by the time he finished his art studies, his figurative painting style had become outdated, and not unlike Van Meegeren, he suffered an existential crisis upon realizing that classical painting was rendered obsolete by Fauvism, Expressionism and Cubism.
I always, since my early youth, since age of 5, 6, I always made drawings, and I discovered that talent of mine to be able to draw or paint in a manner of so or so, matter of fact of Picasso.
Had de Hory lived a century earlier, he would have had little trouble making a living off his work. But at this time his situation was made all the worse by the Great Depression, a worldwide financial crisis that pulled many buyers out of the art market. This had made his prospects of becoming an artist difficult. Police files in Geneva, Switzerland indicate misdemeanor charges and arrests between the late 1920s and the 1930s. During this period he was convicted 10 times in 5 European cities for crimes including check fraud, counterfeiting documents and falsely claiming an aristocratic title.
Even of not big success, but enough to make a living, if not an elegant living, but a living, something enough to have to eat, and once in a while I can buy myself a suit or I can go to a good restaurant or so forth. But I wasn't able. So for the first time I saw with that easiness a drawing what took me exactly 5 minutes to make, and it assured my living for the next month or 2 months, I would like to see that poor Hungarian refugee who would have resisted of that temptation.
At the outbreak of the Second World War, de Hory returned to Hungary, soon ending up in a Transylvanian prison in the Carpathian Mountains for political dissidents, because of claims he had been involved with a British journalist and suspected spy. Although he was released later during the war, his whereabouts from 1939 to 1949 remain unknown. De Hory frequently claimed that he was imprisoned in Nazi concentration camps and that his whole family had been killed by the Nazis, but ultimately this has been discredited by researchers who discovered one of his siblings. He returned to Paris in 1946, poor and hungry. One day he was paid a visit by Lady Malcolm Campbell, who spotted one of his drawings on the wall in his studio apartment and thought it was a Picasso. She asked him if it was for sale. After a moment's hesitation, during which time his stomach grumbled, he replied in the affirmative. She paid for this small sketch a considerable sum, £40 sterling to be exact. With that amount he could live for 2 months. He weighed up the moral objections to this deceit, but after an expensive meal, caressed by copious amounts of fine wine, he knew there was no going back to a life of penury.
Well, a woman, an English woman, a titled English woman, walked in one day to my room, and she saw on the wall, pinned on the wall, a drawing. I said, "Hey, where you got that Picasso?" I said, "Well, do you think it's a Picasso?" I said, "Well, I know enough about Picasso to know whether it's a Picasso or not." I said, "Fine." He said, "Would you sell it?" I said, "Well, delighted."
Having experienced repeated unsuccessful attempts to ignite his own career, de Hory focused on his talent for imitation, selling his replicas to renowned galleries in Paris, pretending to be a displaced Hungarian aristocrat, selling his family's art collection. At the beginning, he focused on counterfeiting works on paper, as the correct paper was easier to obtain. And since artists such as Picasso and Matisse were still living, it was believable that an unknown work could appear on the market. Also that such minor works wouldn't come to the attention of the artists themselves. By creating only minor works, his forgeries were less likely to arouse suspicion. He even produced fake lithographs. De Hory avoided using any type of pigment on paper until 1949, when he began adding gouache and watercolor to his ink drawings, creating a patina with light bulb-assisted drying and aging the paper with tea. When he started producing works on canvas, he would buy 19th century paintings at flea markets and scrape the paint off. To artificially age the works, he used two widely available commercial varnishes: Vernier à craquelure, a varnish that produced rapid cracking when the varnish dries, and Vernier à vieillir, which imparts the illusion of varnish darkened by age.
And then, very timidly, I made 2-3 other drawings. I walked on the Rue de Seine to a big dealer, and I showed him. He says, "Yes, fine, how much you want for them?" And I suddenly realized I can sell something absolutely unexpectedly for quite great deal of money in a time when I was unable, but absolutely unable, to sell any of my paintings.
In 1947, Elmire moved to New York. Later that year, he was able to find a vintage canvas which had the correct stretcher for his next forgery, a Modigliani. After completing the painting, he baked it in the oven to dry the oil paint. Even so, it took 2 months to dry, but it was a success and was sold without suspicion to the Nouveau Gallery in New York. Soon after, he would expand his repertoire of forgeries to include works by Matisse and Renoir. But throughout his career, he concentrated largely on Modigliani. Since he was an artist with a very short life, his works rare, and because of their rarity, fetch very high prices. To sell his works, de Hory created a fake identity and impersonated a Hungarian aristocrat who had fallen on hard times after the war and who owned a collection of high-quality artworks that he was forced to sell. De Hory often displayed a portrait of himself and one of his brothers in sailor suits allegedly painted by the famous Hungarian portraitist Philip de Laszlo, but years later was discovered to be painted by de Hory himself. de Hory did not pay much attention to the era and characteristics of specific pigments used by the artists he was forging, because forensic studies of artworks hadn't yet developed. Like many other forgers, using the wrong pigments is what eventually shed a light on the fake art market.
And then sometimes when I had absolutely no money, I was completely broke, I made a Modigliani drawing, I took him to one of the big dealers around Beverly Hills, and never happened that I didn't sell them. I always sold them.
In 1959, de Hory made a business arrangement with two dealers, Fernand Legros and Réal Lessard, who devised many of the most brilliant tactics for selling his forgeries, on 5 continents over a period of 9 years. These included copying stamps and producing their own documents. Legros and Lessard recognized the importance of hiring art experts who could guarantee the authenticity of works. They knew who to bribe and who to cheat. At some point, they even managed to convince the artist Kees van Dongen that he himself had painted a work by Elmire de Hory. When they held an exhibition on Raoul Dufy, they made sure to mix authentic works with those made by Elmire. They put forgeries up for auction and then purchased them back. This ensured the paintings were on record as having previously been publicly sold. They did the same with the customs stamps, which in turn provided an artificial provenance. To create further fictitious documentation of provenance, Legros even inserted photographic copies of de Hory forgeries into pre-war auction catalogues and artists' monographs. The status given to an artwork which is included in a catalogue raisonné provides an almost unquestionable authenticity for even the most nervous buyer.
Elmire is a profound embarrassment to them all. Il est un embarrassement profond à tout le monde de l'art.
During the 1950s and 60s, de Hory is believed to have forged more than 1,000 works by great artists. Many have been removed from museums. Others, some experts say, have not been and perhaps never will be. De Hory created so many forgeries of Amadeo Modigliani that it has become impossible to compile a definitive catalogue of the artist's original work. Also during this period, de Hory's forgeries started to raise eyebrows, and an FBI investigation was opened to look into the many claims that he was selling fakes.
Well, I would like to make, first of all, a point. I don't copy painters. I paint in a certain style. It could be in the style of Matisse, or in the style of Modigliani, style of Picasso, style of Dufy. I don't copy. I never copied one.
When Fernand Legros, the art dealer from New York, who began selling hand-drawn lithographs and other forged works by de Hory, became aware of the FBI's interest, he warned de Hory, who then fled to Ibiza. He arrived in the summer of 1961. During this time, Legros continued the business partnership from Paris and lived extravagantly from the unfair distribution of profits. When it was later discovered that Legros had sold 40 forged paintings to the Texas oil millionaire Al Gore Meadows, Legros issued a myriad of counter-lawsuits and accusations to prolong the legal process.
Who knows? What is it? What makes you travel? You want to change the landscape, you want to meet new people, you want to meet new faces, you think you meet somebody more attractive in the next town as you met there. You never know. Why? Why people travel, do you know?
Because the FBI and the police in 4 different states were on his tail.
Most of the works he painted would be done in Ibiza in the 1960s, where he had a hidden studio in his villa named La Falaise. His life was relatively quiet until the fraud was uncovered. Fleeing justice, he soon had Legros co-inhabiting the villa, who claimed ownership and threatened to evict de Hory. Living with Legros was increasingly difficult, so de Hory decided to leave Ibiza. Legros and Lessard were arrested shortly thereafter and jailed on charges of various check frauds. Eventually, de Hory decided to let go of his fake identity and reveal himself as an art forger to the world. With this idea in mind, he even teamed up with the novelist Clifford Irving to write his best-selling biography, Fake, published in 1969. Fittingly enough, Irving told de Hory's version of the story, including countless exaggerations and inventions. His life was also covered by the Orson Welles film F is for Fake, and has been explored in many other books and documentaries such as Real Fake, The Art, Life and Crimes of Elmire de Hory. Tired of eluding Interpol for some time, de Hory decided to return to Ibiza and accept his fate. It was not until August 1968 that a court convicted him, and solely for crimes of homosexuality, without being able to show any visible supporting evidence to be able to associate him with the Legros and Lessard frauds, sentencing him to only 2 months in prison and 1 year expulsion from the island. During that period he resided in Torremolinos, Malaga. A year after his release, Elmire de Hory, who was by then a celebrity, returned to Ibiza.
Well, Cliff Irving left Ibiza for New York.
I wanted to find out what it was really like to try and get an expertise on a fake. And I asked Elmire to do 3 drawings for me, 2 Matisse and a Modigliani, which he did before lunch, and put a little coffee stain on the edge of the Modigliani to make it look really as if Modigliani had done it in some Paris cafe. I then took the 3 drawings to the Museum of Modern Art and gave them some tall tale that I had inherited them from an aunt in France, and I had no idea how she'd gotten them. I didn't even know the aunt. And I'd heard so much about fake art lately that before I sold them, I wanted to find out if they were genuine. The museum examined them for 2 hours and came back with the verdict that they were absolutely genuine, and in fact were horrified that I wanted to sell them.
In the early 1970s, de Hory decided he would now attempt to sell his own original work, as he had gained some fame in the art world. But he made little profit and soon learned that the French authorities were trying to extradite him to stand trial on fraud charges. As a rule, this took a long time, as Spain was going through its last years of dictatorship and did not have any extradition treaties with France yet.
I would prefer to sell my own paintings and my own drawings. I don't think so I ever felt great about, to fool people. I do feel amused about that I'm able to fool once in a while somebody very, very pompous and somebody very pretentious. That I like, that idea. But, to live on it, and on making it more than necessary, I never did besides, I unhappily sold everything what I sold very miserably. the big money what was made was never made by me. It was always made by the dealers and the people who resold it. What I got for it was a token.
On December the 11th, 1976, Mark Forgy, de Hory's assistant and partner, informed him that the Spanish and French governments had reached an agreement to extradite him. Soon after, de Hory took an overdose of sleeping pills and requested that Forgy not intervene or stop him from taking his own life. However, Forgy later went for help to take de Hory to a local hospital, but during the journey he died in Forgy's arms. The extradition order arrived the next day. Ibiza's White Cemetery holds the remains of one of the art world's greatest forgers. While nowadays more facts continue to emerge about de Hory forgeries, which have been subjected to rigorous lab analysis that has identified his forging techniques. There is a joke in the art world that the 19th century artist Jean-Baptiste Corot made 10,000 paintings, 25,000 of which are in the United States. The point is that the French painter's landscapes became so popular that forging them became a small industry in itself. A message to all the so-called art experts, dealers and museum directors who today exhibit fakes. Why, not even Picasso was capable of recognizing whether a painting was his or de Hory's. How much did they pay for it? Picasso inquired. $100,000, they told him. Well then, it is authentic. The final word goes to de Hory. If my paintings were hung long enough in an art museum, they would become authentic. In a 1973 interview, the master forger portrayed himself as a victim rather than a criminal. I dislike the word, and besides, I don't find it fair. I am a victim of the customs and laws of the world of painting. Is not the market itself the real scandal? On a merely artistic level, I would like to consider myself a performer. Just like one can love Bach through Ostrage, one can love Modigliani through me.
To prove my point to the world, that very point, what I always insisted, that the so-called experts are people who are greatly pretentious, pretend to know something, what they only know very superficially. The so-called art directors are probably excellent people to raise money for their art institution, but their knowledge on art is absolutely negligible. They could do very well without them, the world. That was just a simple demonstration, and he doesn't want to be a Matisse. He just wants to demonstrate how in short minutes close I can get to Matisse.
Well, my friends, I hope you enjoyed that presentation. The previous presentation I did about a forger was, of course, the Van Meegeren. I'll put that link in the description for those who haven't seen it. There was quite a few people who enjoyed that and wanted me to do other forgers, art forgers, and so I thought I'd do this one. I actually have the book Fake by Clifford Irving, which I bought in Australia a long time ago, so I knew about this case beforehand. There's the actual book that I have, published by London Hyman, 1970, the hardback. Getting quite good prices, as are Mr. Duhori's paintings nowadays. They're fetching thousands as well. I'm sure he would have a wry smile if he could see the prices that his paintings were fetching now. But it's a shame he couldn't sell his own paintings at the time when he was alive. It's always a shame, isn't it, when, he's tempted into a life of crime because he was impoverished. No, he was obviously a good painter. Nobody wanted to buy his paintings, the same as Van Meegeren. And so we have this unfairness in the art market where people are buying signatures. And I said that in the Van Meegeren episode. It's because people are buying signatures and art dealers are selling signatures. That's all it is. The Texas guy who bought all those paintings, he's not an art connoisseur. He just wants to buy them for investment value and so he can show them off at his dinner parties. That's it. And so here we have, in the words of Elmire himself, just listen to this.
I would like to see any expert or any museum director or any art dealer would know which one is a Matisse and which one is by Elmire.
You see, nowadays they can do tests to detect fakes. And back then, Elmire himself was just using commercial paints that were widely available at the time. Nowadays, an art forger has to be a lot more crafty. He would have to go and buy really old pigments, and if they've dried out, using a mortar and pestle, repowder them, and they have to be really careful that they can pass the tests that are available now. They didn't have that back then, so they would have to rely on the style of the painting. And he was very good at emulating the style of different artists. They couldn't pick him. They just couldn't do it at the time. It was only when he revealed himself to the public that they started having a bit of a closer look, at this little man with a monocle who had been into their gallery selling things. But before that, there was no suspicion. Only when suspicion was aroused, that is when they started looking into it, despite what they say afterwards, after the fact. So here we have the art newspaper, Enigma by Clifford Irving. This must be another book. I haven't got this book and I haven't written it. So over 20 years after it was originally written, Irving's book finally sees the sun. As it says here, this is an Elmire Duhori fake of Modigliani. I have to be very careful how I pronounce Modigliani, because when I did my episode on Modigliani, I was pronouncing it Modigliani, as an English person would, and so many people attacked me in the comment section. Oh my goodness, they'll never look at anything else in the video, but they're just waiting to pick and jump on one little typo or one little pronunciation error. They're just waiting for that. And these people are incredible. Oh my goodness. Yeah, so it sold for $5,280. And when was this? This was from 1991. So it'll be worth a bit more now. So this article is very critical of Mr. Duhori, and it says, indeed, even at the time, the 40s, 50s and 60s, only his imitations of Matisse pen drawings ever caused any serious problems, and some of these drawings ended up in minor American museums. A book about Duhori is being launched this month, which inevitably presents him as a perverse anti-hero of the art world. I see they haven't included his date of death there. He was already dead when this article was published, so they didn't even look into that to see whether he was alive or dead. The brilliant faker who steals a march on the market and a true artistic genius. Actually, the book first appeared 20 years ago, but Duhori's collaborator, the French dealer Fernand Legros, denied he had ever been involved and sued So that's why the book was withdrawn. So what they said here is not true. Only his imitations of Matisse pen drawings ever caused any serious problems. This sounds like sort of sour grapes, doesn't it? It's always after the fact that the so-called experts come out and say, oh, of course we weren't fooled, of course we weren't fooled. But they were. But they were, as you can see here, this is a portrait sold in the late 1950s to close friends of De Hori. They believed it to be a genuine work by Amedeo Modigliani, and later donated the painting to an art museum in Miami, where it hung as an authentic work of art for years. After De Hori was exposed, the museum returned the forgery to the donors, who displayed the painting in their home as a reminder of their bad faith purchase, as well as friendship with a man who turned out to be one of the most infamous art forgers in history. So, as I say, at the time, the museums and the dealers were absolutely accepting, with good faith. When Émile de Hory took a painting or a drawing to one of these dealers, he never ever said, "This is by so-and-so," because that could get him into trouble if it was found out. He would let them decide. He would let them judge who the artist was. And, of course, they always accepted it as original. I don't know what his friends did, this Laguerre and the Real guy. They were probably more towards selling it as the original and with these forged documentation. But he didn't do that himself, Émile de Hory. He would just take it to them and they would look at it. And as he said, he made a fraction. They made the big money. And by the way, the lady who bought the Picasso drawing off him for £40, she later told him that she sold it for £150. So she didn't lose out. And whoever she sold it to probably sold it for a great deal more. And there's a lot of fakes. They reckon even now, there's in all the art museums in the world, there's probably about 25% are fakes. And they don't know. They don't know it. I do love it. Oh, my cat is crying at the door. I don't know if you can hear her. So, my dear friends, I would love to hear your feedback on that. I pretty much said in my last episode about the art forger Van Meegeren and everything I really think on this subject. You probably know already, but I would love to know your thoughts. Do you think the people who buy fakes are themselves to blame for buying a signature instead of buying a painting because they love the look of it? And I think you should always buy artwork because you love it, because you think it's beautiful, not because it's worth thousands or millions. Then it just becomes a commodity, an investment value, and I find that quite horrible, actually, especially for artists like Van Gogh and Modigliani. I really find it hard. I want to say that G. I really want to say that G in Modigliani. He himself would be horrified to think, that his paintings and drawings are selling for absolutely huge amounts when he couldn't even swap them for a drink of some absinthe or something like that, or schnapps. It's crazy. Anyway, on this episode, I'm not going to rattle on too much. I will love you and leave you. I do hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Love to hear your thoughts. Take care, my friends. God bless. Bye-bye. Just a quick addendum here. As usual, I have remembered something after I thought I had ended the presentation. Some of you are thinking, oh no, he's back again. But I will be brief as possible. I was just thinking, after my little rant there, that some of you might be thinking, well, Oddie, aren't you being hypocritical, seeing as that you own some works of art by quite well-known artists? I can understand some of you thinking that way, but the difference is I do not pay high prices for these artworks, and in previous years I never had the funds to do so, and I just wouldn't do it anyway out of principle. I wouldn't be going to an auction house and paying lots and lots of money just to have a work of art that I can show my friends and say, hey, look at this, I own this painting by such and such, isn't that wonderful? It's worth so much. I don't do that, and also I wouldn't be going online to try and speculate to buy something, less than a market value in the hope that it's by a famous artist. I don't do that. When I buy something, it's because I like it. It's because I like the look of it. It pleases me, or it intrigues me. It's curious enough, and I think, well, and of course the monetary value, I'm not going to say that doesn't come into it at all. But a lot of the stuff that I have, I will probably keep until my death. I won't sell. Apart from maybe the one that is probably worth the most, I would sell that, and I probably will eventually, and that will go towards our dream property when we retire. Although I would like to keep it, I do like it, and I bought it. It was unsigned, didn't know who it was from at the time, so I just paid a value that I thought was good for me. So that is the main difference. I would never go and buy artwork just because it's a signature. I don't do that. But I have a keen eye. Saying that, I do have a keen eye. I have a good eye for antiques and paintings. Basically, it has to speak to my soul. I like it. For instance, this image you are seeing on the screen, found in a junk shop here many years ago in Switzerland. And, to all intents and purposes, I don't know if it is, but I think it's from Joseph Mallard William Turner. You're probably thinking, well, how could you find something like that in a junk shop? Surely. Just to make you aware, Turner actually travelled in Switzerland in the early 19th century, about 1817, travelled through the continent, through Italy and Spain, etc., and travelled through the Swiss Alps, and did a lot of drawings which are now lost. They have been lost. I don't know whether this is worth very much. It's not very big. You have to excuse my chair, it's squeaking all the time. It's not very big. And the reason that I'm guessing that I found it for a very cheap price in a junk shop was because if you ask most of the Swiss, do they know Joseph Turner, the English painter, they will say no. I've asked them. Of course, I'm not asking art experts, I'm asking normal people. Have you heard of Turner? Have you heard of L.S. Lowry? They haven't got a clue. They concentrate more on their famous national artists. So there's a good chance that you will find works by artists from other countries in Swiss junk shops because people just don't know about it. And unless they go around scouring and have a good eye and have their iPhone with them and to look up names, and I got this before those days anyway. But saying that, if for instance, I came across a painting by a very famous Czechoslovakian artist, I wouldn't have a clue either. But somebody from Czechoslovakia living here in Switzerland would know, and they would grab a bargain. So I'm just going by what I found and what I know and what the Swiss people mostly don't know. They're not aware of these English artists. So, yeah, I got a good bargain with this little sketch. I believe he had a whole notepad of sketches he did in Switzerland, but that's all lost. So perhaps this is a page from one of them. So I just wanted to make that clear. But people who are thinking that I'm also an art dealer or an art speculator, no, I just buy it because I like it. Unlike the dealers, I'm not interested in turning a quick buck. I am rambling. I'm going now. I would love to know your thoughts, and for any suggestions for further artists to cover, you're most welcome to give me your suggestions. I'm definitely gone now. Bye-bye.